all, especially the minister and other senior government officials, honorable members. The agenda for today's meeting is briefing by the National Disaster Management Center on disaster risk reduction strategies for the upcoming winter season.
Recording in progress.
Apologies, but I would allow the secretary to indicate who has apologized. Portfolio Committee Secretary.
Good morning, everybody. There's been an apology from both deputy ministers. They're attending the NCOP 3-year planning. Okay, and then Minister and DG will leave the meeting early as they're also attending that 3-year planning. Chairperson, some of the members are just struggling to connect, but there's been apologies from Honorable Teresa. He will be joining the meeting late as he's traveling. Thank you, Chair.
Do we form a quorum?
Sorry, yes, Chairperson, we do.
Oh, we do. Thank you very much.
Chairperson.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm traveling. I don't hear Shireen submitting my apology.
Can you submit it yourself?
Apologies, Honorable Chair.
Yeah. Okay, we have noted the apology, Honorable Space. The agenda for today is briefing, as already indicated by the Disaster Management Center. But because the minister, what I read here, says you might leave early, if you would like to make any comments before we allow the presenter to present. Honorable Minister. Is the minister in the meeting?
Chairperson, it doesn't seem like Minister is here at the moment. I did see earlier that Minister was on the platform.
But
Can
we quickly hand over to the presenter from the Disaster Management Center, or whoever has been delegated to do the presentation would acknowledge the minister when she's in. Can we get a presentation from Cocta or Peacock?
Chairperson, thank you very much. My name is Elias Sithole. I'll be taking the portfolio committee on the disaster risk reduction strategy presentation. Morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable members, Minister, DG, and the colleagues. Chair, we have structured the presentation into two forms. If I may be allowed, Chair, just to switch off my video so that I can be able to present properly.
But we didn't even see you. If you
okay.
show your face and then you can switch it off. Okay.
Yes, Chair. Yes, my face.
Oh,
yes, my face,
that corner here.
Okay, no, yeah. Okay. No, thank you very much, Chair. Chair, the presentation is structured into two forms. We'll be covering the work which we are doing as a National Disaster Management Center, of course, working with our stakeholders, but also working very closely with the South African Weather Services. So I have my colleagues here who will also come and present the 4 slides which are included in this presentation is Dr. Engelbrecht, is a lead scientist in the South African Weather Service dealing with the long-range predictions. The next slide, Marty. The next slide, Chair, I'll just maybe quickly touch before I come to the introduction, touch on the purpose and outline of the presentation, which is the, we are, as the National Disaster Management Center, continue to promote an integrated and coordinated system of disaster management with special emphasis on prevention and mitigation by all relevant stakeholders. The presentation, Chair, will cover the following: the introductions, the contingency planning for 2023 with winter season, and also seasonal forecast, and also we'll be touching on the issues of disaster risk assessment and winter hazard profile, but also the disaster risk reduction strategies which we are implementing, and also the critical areas of concern, and also which requires intervention. And lastly, we'll be then touching on issues of the key interventions. The next slide, which is the introductions. Chair, in this slide, we are saying that South Africa continue facing an increasing level of disaster risk. Of course, it is exposed to a wide range of weather hazards, including snows, diseases, drought, fires, tropical cyclones, specifically during summer season, and of course, also with the severe weather hazards that can trigger widespread hardship to the communities and also the devastations. Also, the issue of climate change is with us now. It continues to affect the communities. So climate change is uttering the face of disaster risk, not only through the increased weather-related risk and sea level and temperature rises, but also the climate change, it also through increase in societal vulnerability, for example, from stresses of water availability, because we have got other parts of the countries which are struggling in terms of the water scarcity, but also affecting the agricultural sector and also the ecosystems. And then these conditions, Chair, we're saying that they require investment in preparedness and disaster risk reduction measures by all stakeholders to anticipate future disaster risk, specifically reduce the exposure of vulnerability and improve resilience within the communities. Of course, there are worrying observations and trends, specifically where more people are at risk. For example, the unsustainable development trajectory, where we have got the vulnerability of those settlements, but of course, the poorly planned development where our communities are being exposed to disasters, and the issue of the national hazard as a result of the climate change. Then the next slide, Chair, there we are just putting it into context in terms of the legislation which we are implementing, which is the Disaster Management Act. And that legislation provides for an integrated and coordinated disaster management policy that focuses on prevention, which is very important, or reducing the risk and mitigating the severity of disasters and emergency preparedness, and also the rapid and effective response to disasters, and also post-disaster recovery. We've quoted the legislations, the sections in the Act, which direct the organs of state across all spheres of government, of course, to do the disaster risk assessment for their respective functional areas, for identification and map risk, and also areas exposed to threats or hazards, prepare as well as implement that disaster management plans. Of course, also we always make sure that we work with all sector departments so that they actually develop their own disaster management plans, as the Act also promote that these disaster management plans must set out the following amongst others: the way in which the concept and principles of disaster management are to be applied, including expected climate change and also emergency procedures in event of a disaster, including measures to finance these strategies, but also the disaster risk reductions and also climate change adaptation measures. And also organs of state, according to the legislation, are required to regularly review and update these plans. The next slide, Chair, with your permission, I will then hand over to Dr. Engelberg from South Africa Weather Services just to come in and put the context in terms of their prediction of South Africa Weather Services. Doc?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Can I just get confirmation that my audio is working?
Yes, it is working.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the last 3 summer seasons, or 3 years, and in particular relevant to our summer season, we experienced a La Nina state in terms of the sea surface temperature in the Central Pacific Ocean, which brought mostly above normal rainfall over the country for the past 3 summer seasons. Now, currently, the observed sea surface temperature over what we refer to as the Nino 3.4 region in the Pacific Central part of the ocean has started to warm up. As one can see on the top slide on the left, that little bit of a red coloring there that is starting on the far side of the far right side of that specific image. So what that means is that the state of ENSO has changed. It's currently in a neutral state after the 3 seasons where that sea surface temperatures were below normal. Now, as it started to become warmer than normal, it's very important to see what the prediction will be like for the next few months, and particularly towards the mid part of the year and into the summer season. So it is predicted that an El Nino state is going to develop. At this, usually the state of ENSO is not really impacting the Southern African region during the winter months, but it is important in the sense of planning purposes towards our summer season. So it means that during the next few months, monitoring the state or the strength of ENSO, because usually the stronger it is, the higher the impact in terms of negative impacts of drought and heat wave-like conditions is what is usually happening during a strong ENSO phase. So this time of the year is very important. It's actually now from this time of the year that one can start to have confidence in this kind of forecast. So the image on the right, where all those lines are on that graph, is where different model prediction systems for the state of ENSO is presented. And looking at the average of those predictions, it seems like that we can at this stage be quite confident that a strong ENSO is predicted. But as mentioned, it usually doesn't have an impact over the winter rainfall region. So, and as this presentation is focusing on the winter season, just important to mention that. But in terms of planning purposes, I think moving towards our summer season, it is something to keep in mind. On our next slide, we will see our seasonal forecast. This is the latest seasonal forecast issued by the South African Weather Service. So if we concentrate on the graphs, there are the left panel of those graphs where the green and brownish colors are occurring on the South African region is the forecast for the next 3-month seasons. The top one is for the June, July, August period. The middle one for the July, August, September period, and the bottom one for the August, September, October period. So if we concentrate on the winter rainfall areas, we can see there that the greenish colors is dominant for the June, July, August season. That is then also the main rainy season for the southwestern parts of the country. So in terms of the rainfall outlook for the winter rainfall region, it looks good, with enhanced chance for above normal rainfall to occur over those regions. One can also see that the greenish colors is a bit of a darker shade over those southern, or over most of the Western Cape province for the June, July, August period, and then moving a bit eastwards into the western parts of the eastern parts of the Western Cape and the western parts of the Eastern Cape in that middle image on the left-hand panel for the July, August, September period. So that is good news if we think in terms of for the rainfall catchment areas of the Kuga Dam or for the Gqeberha regions, the Nelson Mandela municipality area. So at this stage, the predictions looks good in terms of rainfall for those areas. Then on the bottom slide, on the bottom image of that left-hand panel, the August, September, October period, at this stage, for the winter rainfall areas, it's the end of their winter or their main rainfall season. So there one can see then that over most of that part of the country, below normal rainfall is actually experienced. Some areas with above normal rainfall, but it is the end of the rainfall season as then already commenced. And at this stage, there's a slight chance for above normal rainfall over the remainder of the country just before the summer season really kicks in, and we expect Enzo or the El Nino that is predicted to start to have an effect. Just to briefly look also on that the images with the yellowish colors, also very important to also keep in mind is that the skill or how good the forecast performed. So for the this is our measure of skill called a rock score. I'm not going to go into the technical details. What is important here is just for that June, July, August period, as well as for the July, August, September period, where mostly above normal rainfall is predicted for the winter rainfall areas, and then for the Eastern Cape areas, is then to concentrate on the right-hand panel, or the most right-handed, or the figure furthest to the right. There for the June, July, August period, one can see there are yellowish colors, mostly there over the southern parts of the country. So that there means that this prediction system, based on about a 30-year or a 20-year period, is mostly skillful over those areas. So we can think of it that most of the time, when above normal rainfall is predicted, it works out for over those areas, which gives us confidence in especially the June, July, August prediction. For July, August, September, the skill decreases over the areas that is important for our winter rainfall. So that translates to for the July, August, September period, we have we must actually have a little bit of less confidence in that specific prediction compared to the June, July, August period. In a practical sense, for planning purposes, it will mean that one will put a higher weight on the prediction for the June, July, August period compared to for the July, August, September period. So then for August, September, October, when we start to move towards the summer parts of the country, there one can see for most of the areas that usually receives winter rainfall, there's that grayish areas over the far western parts of the country is indicative of that there's actually no skill. In very straightforward terms, it means that the seasonal forecast for that August, September, October period for those parts of the western parts of the Northern Cape and most of the area or the western parts of the Western Cape is a bit dicey to really put a confidence in the August, September, October forecast for that part of the region. However, if we look at for the summer rainfall areas, there are large parts there where the forecast seems to be or is indicated to have been skillful. So there one can, in terms of planning purposes, and I think especially with a El Nino expected to have an impact towards midsummer in terms of water conservation practices and planning purposes, this August, September, October prediction at this stage maybe indicates to us that we must really make use of that potential at, let's say, just before the spring period to really make use of the rainfall that is at this stage then predicted for the summer rainfall parts of the country. Then on the last slide is for the temperature forecasts. I mean, this is now quite just reddish colors indicated for the maximum and minimum temperature for all of the 3 seasons, the June, July, August season, July, August, September season, as well as the August, September, October season. And this is indicative of that the maximum and minimum temperatures is expected to be above normal during all of those seasons. So in terms of, I mean, this is also part of the climate change signal coming through. And we have quite high confidence in the fact that the predictions are indicating above normal temperatures. However, there can be, as cold fronts pass over the country from time to time, be cold spells that can even warrant warnings for to take precautions against the cold spell. In that sense, for planning purposes and so on, the following the short range forecast is very important when it comes to events or cold events that is expected to impact activities and your livelihood and so on. Okay, so this is from the Weather Service. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll continue from our side. Let me apologize that where I am, my network now and then is dropping me off. So I was off for 2-3 minutes. So let me apologize about that. Chair, on the issue of the winter hazard profile for fire and flood hazards, the fire hazards, as you see there on the maps, indicated in red, and also medium to high orange fire hazards, specifically observed in the eastern part of South Africa to those provinces like your KZN, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, but also including the minor areas over Northwest and Limpopo. At this stage, we are not in summer season in terms of the flood hazards, but safe to say that elevated flood hazards, as indicated in the darker blues, are noted in the northern coastal of KZN, specifically eThekwini Metro, Umkhanyakude, King Cetshwayo, and Ilembe, and also in the Eastern Cape, Buffalo City, OR Tambo, Amatol, and Sarah Bartman, and in the Western Cape, the city of Tshwane, Overberg, and the Cape Winelands. So in terms of the floods, specifically countrywide forecast for the likelihood of above normal rainfall may escalate hazard conditions in those provinces. The additional, in terms of the forecast seasonal cutoff low, are more intense, specifically in winter, and tend to deliver heavier rainfall in mid to late winter. Chair, you might have seen that sometimes our winter now is no longer the same. It tends to change where we are saying it's winter, but then we end up experiencing some of the rainfall in other parts of the country. In relation to the wind and snow hazards, the wind hazard you see in the map there where we've indicated with the yellow blocks, the winter seasonal hazard profile indicates wind high hazards rating, which is more like a dark green over significant areas, specifically in the Eastern Cape and Western Cape, and also in the Northern Cape. And then when you move towards, on my left, medium to high wind hazard scores, blue-green, are additional noted for the above provinces, as well as areas in the Free State, KZN and Mpumalanga as well. And these are mainly due to cold fronting systems at this time of the year. Quickly, on the issue of the strong berg winds, can occur at any time of the year. However, in the mid to late winter season, devastating fires over the eastern provinces, specifically in the Eastern Cape, KZN, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo, during winter last year and the other previous years, we've seen actually the devastating fires in the Eastern Cape, which really affected a lot of grazing lands there. And in those provinces can precede intense cold fronting weather systems, and therefore weather and general circulation ahead of the cold change is important to monitor. Of course, if there's other provinces which are affected by snow hazards, the elevated snow hazards, which is red and orange scores for the winter month, are observed over parts of the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, bordering specifically Lesotho, and both minimum and maximum temperature are forecasted to likely to above normal. This may mitigate snow hazard propensity this season. While snow is common over mountainous regions in the winter month, the more significant disruptive snowfall event associated with deeper, more persistent snowfall tend to occur over eastern part of South Africa, specifically in the Drakensberg mountain and in the later winter month, or even as late as September. Then the next slide, Secretariat. Here there are provinces also which are prone to drought during winter, and this drought also they've really affected the agriculture sector. The drought occurs still remains very limited following 2 wet summers and wet conditions during most of the current summers over the country. So severely to extreme drought at the medium to long range time scale is limited to small spatial areas, specifically in provinces like the Eastern Cape, and also we've seen in the areas of the Northern Cape as well. Due to widespread above normal rains also over the winter rainfall region since December 2022, drought extent and intensity diminished over this region relatively to the situation earlier, which really helped the agriculture sector in relation to recovering from the drought of previous years. The next slide, in this one, we are more focusing on the monitoring of the conditions and also the hazard profiles. The National Disaster Management Center, Chair, we have a geographic information system, which is an application which we use in disaster management, where certain areas actually, and also certain areas are being monitored, but also we use it for early warning system as well. So monitoring of conditions, the NDMC in partnership with disaster management stakeholders continue to monitor and consult on development of hazardous conditions. The NDMC Geographic Information System portal hosts a number of early warnings, which are very important to the communities and also to the stakeholders who might be affected by particular hazards. And also in terms of hazard monitoring products, which we have at the NDMC, and also other services as well. The platform facilitates data sharing and also analysis and also information sharing to promote situational awareness to the disaster management fraternity and also South African public. I think, Chair, the question which has been asked in most of the time, especially when we go to the municipalities, is that, yes, we have all these early warnings which you guys will receive, so what? And the question which our answers to the question was that we want to work with communities, traditional communities, the chiefs, the indunas, so that this information, it reaches the intended communities out there. The next slide, in this one, Chair, I'm zooming in now in terms of the plan as we normally each and every year, the National Disaster Center prepare the winter season plans. When we're approaching summer, then we prepare also the summer season plans as well. NDMC facilitated the updating, development, and submission of the disaster management contingency plans for the winter season by the provincial disaster centers and also the national organs of state. Circulars to request the development and updating and submission of the plans to the NDMC were issued on the 16th of March 2006 to PDMCs, to provincial disaster centers, and the national organs of state with regular reminders. Also, the circular were issued together with the guidelines in terms of the contingency planning as well as the hazard profile development developed by the NDMC. So the workshop was held on the April 2023, prior to the submission date, to provide support, deliberate on the progress for the development, updating of these plans, as well as facilitate submission by the stakeholders. We've taken a decision, Chair, that NDMC, we are not going to accept any plan for compliance purposes where a province will just submit a plan so that they tick the box. But we want a living document, a plan which can be implemented when something happens in those provinces. The next slide, please. And then these plans, as we prepare with our stakeholders, NDMC has prepared and finalized the national disaster management contingency plans for the 2023 winter season. The plan is risk-based and also provide an insight on the forecast issued by South African Weather Services, combined with the profile of virus hazards produced by the National Disaster Center. This plan, safe to say, Chair, so that we explain actually this plan, its objectives. The objectives of the plan outline the counter preparedness capabilities, response arrangement within an integrated approach, share responsibilities between government, state-owned entities, private institutions, agencies, communities, individuals for the coordinations and management of seasonal hazards. Roles and responsibilities so that we avoid this finger pointing when something happens. Also, it provides the human and financial resources, communication channels, and any other resource or activities or activity required for the country to prepare, mitigate, respond timely and effectively to any incident that may occur. Also, this plan guides decision to ensure that budget allocation support implementation of preparedness, specifically the contingency arrangement. Furthermore, the plan outlined the likelihood of occurrence of hazard, which include fires, floods, windstorms, snows, and drought. As I've indicated, you will some of the provinces which are prone to fires during winter, these plans shall come handy as well. These require appropriate actions and also availing of resources by all the stakeholders. And as and when we develop this plan, we make sure that, as I've indicated, stakeholders, they know what to do when something happens. The next slide, please. This is our first responders, Chair. We might have seen in other provinces where firefighters, they are desperately and hardly working. Some of them end up losing their lives when they have to fight fires. The fire service's role and responsibilities, because if this component is weak, indirectly, actually, the likelihood of dealing with the fires is actually slim. So we have provincial offices which are coordinating the issues of fire services in those provinces. When you go to the local municipalities, then you have got fire stations which are equipped with equipment and vehicles actually to deal with fires. So provincial and local fire services develop, support, and implement of fire safety and also prevention of programs as well. Conducting fire risk assessment and also provide provision of support in the implementation of the Act, but also provide implementation support to integrated field fire management encompasses a range of activities as prescribed by banning or field fire control, risk minimization, training and awareness, resource management, coordination, and ecosystems. Also, firefighting or extinguishing fires as well. Protection of lives or property against fires or other threatening danger, and also rescue of life and properties from a fire or other dangers. Safe to say, Chair, is that we've seen it in provinces where we have got a lot of informal settlement. Sometimes when those communities are being affected by fires, you find that 3,000, 6,000 people actually displaced or lost all their properties or their belongings, and then they need to be housed somewhere. And as government, we have to, again, try to assist those communities as well. So the approach now is to make sure that those fires actually they don't happen. The fire safety prevention programs, fire services across the country have adopted the principles of the National Fire Safety Prevention Strategy, as gazetted in the Fire Services White Paper. In line with that strategy, the following key fire safety and prevention programs are being implemented within the municipality across the country. The door-to-door campaign, home visitation programs, and those programs deliver targeted interventions at the household level that address the immediate social and physical environment to which high-risk groups are exposed and thus improve fire safety outcome. But also learn not to burn, specifically preschool fire prevention programs, where those preschool programs is very effective in teaching children in terms of life-saving, fire safety behaviors and skills, also promotion of residential smoke alarms. And smoke alarms provide an earlier warning systems, alerting people and permitting them time to escape before the fire spread. These low-cost devices can easily be installed and maintained in any household environment. I must indicate that this is not the only technology which we are exploring as a National Disaster Center. We are also doing research in terms of what are other technology we can also implement in those areas which are most affected by fires. Also, we have got the Fire and Burn Prevention Week. The goal of Fire and Burn Prevention Week is to coordinate efforts to educate the public, to take precautions to prevent potential harmful fires, and be educated about surviving them. The next slide. The next slide also, we are talking about, no, go back, Marty. The next slide, there is a Raging Rhino fire prevention mascot, and individual fire services within the municipality conduct their own campaigns targeting specific high-risk communities and groups using Raging Rhino mascot as a tool for intervention. It's really it worked very well, this kind of mascot, specifically with small kids, because it resembled some of the TV programs in terms of the small kids, in terms of teaching them about fires as well. Also, we have got Community Emergency Response Team, normally called SERT. And it provides community members with the skills and knowledge to respond to fires in the initiative stages, while the fires and emergency services respond often reduce the level of destructive and injuries significantly. This one, Chair, is more like we bring the community together, we train them. Sometimes we have got volunteers within those communities. When I was in Gauteng, we have to make sure that each and every ward, we make sure that we have this kind of teams, so that when something happens, and then this team, they can respond while the fire services are coming to deal with fires. Also, we have got the basic emergencies, safety and fire education centers, which are commonly known as the Be Safe centers. It's a place where children and adults learn about the dangers of fire in their homes, methods of preventions, practices, exist, drills, and other types of hazards. A team of public safety educators deliver fire and life safety education information, tour the facilities with the children, simulate a fire in the fire safety home, and also practice safe evacuations, and also many other interactive safety activities. I must indicate these programs, they come handy, especially at the primary schools, because that's where actually we keep it fun, but also at the end of the day, the kids, they learn in terms of the safety of fire. The next slide, please. Yeah, just quickly, Chair, it's just the demonstration of the institutional arrangement, which we have at the national sphere, but also when you go to provinces, you'll find more or less some of the structures which are mirroring what we have international. We have the Intergovernmental Committee on Disaster Management, which is commonly known as the ICDM, which is chaired by the Minister of COCTA. And in that committee, we've got more or less all the cabinet members in the committee, of course, with the MECs from different provinces, and also with members of the municipal councillors as well. And most of this, you might have seen this committee mostly of the time, we've activated it when we were dealing with the floods of April 22 in KZN. Also, we've got the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum, and this is a legislated forum which is chaired by the head of the National Disaster Management Center. It involves all the senior representatives from the national departments, and also the head of centers from different provinces, but also the SALCA representative, and also disaster management expert as well. And in this forum, we use it in multi-purpose in terms of advising the head, indirectly also advising the ICDM whether do we need to move to the next stage, specifically when we're dealing with disasters as well. When we are also dealing with the disasters, there's a committee which we call it NJFCC, which is the National Joint Flood Drought Coordinating Committee, where if we have a province experiencing drought, and this committee actually we activate it. Then at the National Disaster Center, we used to have a disaster operations center, which is focusing on COVID. It was more focused on issues of COVID, because now COVID has actually stabilized. We have repurposed it now. We are calling now is the Joint Special Command, which is now a center which actually brings everybody under one roof to deal with a particular a disaster or hazard or any incidences. Under those, the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum, we have then your task teams focusing on the specific areas, and then we have then allocated departments to lead those work streams according to their line functions, so that it's easy to deal with the specific issue, and then that representative will come and report to the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum. The next slide. Quickly on this one, I've already explained how these structures operate. Let me just indicate that the last slide, we're talking about the net joints, which is a security structure which facilitates the activation of the relevant prof joints and the other structures dealing with issues which are more security related, of course, working with disaster management in the space as well. The next slide, quickly. Here we are covering the escalation mechanism which we normally use, which is level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3, depending on the scale of the incident. We'll know that if this event is being classified as level 1, and then what kind of capacity actually we need to deploy in that space as well. So I will quickly jump on this one because this one is more operational. The next slide is the potential impact and disaster risk reduction measures. I've covered fires, specifically focusing on the felt and structural fires, and also with their potential impact, and also the measures to reduce the risk of those hazards as well. Under fire, let me just quickly run through the issue of measures to reduce the risk of the hazards, which are the awareness creation amongst the communities, including farming communities. Also the early warning alerts through the use of the fire danger index rating, and also the advanced fire information system, which is commonly known as AFIS, and also the activation of the Fire Protection Association supported by provinces and municipalities. I must indicate that the fire protection services, they always come handy when we are dealing with the rural fires or fed fires as well. Also, government support to farmers to construct fire belts and also fire breaks, and also deployment of other resources such as working on fire. Windstorms, the measures to reduce the risk of that hazards, we normally conduct the awareness campaigns, and also dissemination of the early warnings are led to communities at risk, and also monitoring of the situation through the NDMC, and also the provinces and the municipalities' preparedness measures through the cleaning of stormwater drainage system to avoid floodings if it is a summer season. But we have seen also now during winter season, we are experiencing rains as well, specifically in the river banks cleaning amongst others. Communicable diseases surveillance to avoid spread of communicable diseases, identification of the vulnerable communities to ensure deployment of resources through provinces and municipalities coordinations. Also then, last point, the rapid response and restoration of damaged infrastructure through the implementation of temporary infrastructure. The next slide is quickly dealing with floods. We're not in the flood season, but those are the measures to reduce that risk. Like, for example, the technical identification of the impact of the hazards, also the preparation, development of that hazard awareness material, conducting of specific hazard awareness programs, dissemination of the early warning messages, clearing of the water, of course, clearing of the stormwater drainage system as well. Drought, continuous awareness on water conservations and demand management across the country. We've seen the issue of cholera because of sometimes water issues in some of the areas. So these are the things really which sometimes important. Dissemination of the early warnings for early actions, monitoring of the situation, and also implementation of the interventions, also sector implementation of their contingency plans, and also the end mitigation measures. Timely, which is very important, dissemination of the early warnings are led as and when received from the South African Weather Services to communities to promote early warnings actions. Then the next slide, which is COVID, I'll skip that one. And the all hazards, all provinces will activate that Joint Operations Center, which is commonly known as JOC, to monitor, respond, report, and intervene as and when the situation demands. Chair, on this one, we are trying to avoid a situation where we are dealing disaster management through the media reports, because we don't want to sit and watch the news, then the news start to report to say there are situations happening there and disaster centers are not aware. So we are running really the intelligence-driven disaster management and fire services so that when something happens, this thing is reported to the job. The next slide, critical areas of concern and also require interventions is the disaster management and contingency planning. We have observed the absence of disaster management plans from other sectors, and also the contingency plans within the organs of states. Impractical plans where people they just draft the plans for the sake of compliance purposes, but we are managing the thing now by coming up with a workshop so that we can start workshopping some of these things, how best they can actually come up with a plan which is implementable. Non-implementation of the plans and plans not resourced. So some will find that the department or that organs of state will actually draft the plan, but the plan, when something happens, they can't actually even activate the plan because the plan is not resourced. Also, the disaster risk reduction measures not prioritized, especially early warnings not followed by early actions. So people, they will receive early warnings and they will sit back and watch actually what's going to happen. When something happens, only to find that there's no enough time actually to implement what they need to implement. Infrastructure not maintained, and also poor workmanship, and also the funded project from development program not implemented, and funds being actually sent back to the national fiscus, leading to disastrous events within the community. The last point there, non-implementation of legislation and also bylaws, we have seen that development in risky and vulnerable areas, specifically in wetlands, where people, they will actually reside in the wetland. When something happens, then they find themselves in a very difficult situation. The next one is the disaster risk reduction awareness programs. The disaster risk reduction mechanism are implemented through the following 4 pillars, which is the risk knowledge, the disseminations, the warning services, and also the response capability. And these 4 elements are people centers, specifically the earlier warnings. The South African Weather Services, they've now moved to the space where they've developed the impact-based earlier warning systems, so that when they issue the earlier warnings, then we know this area in this province is likely to be mostly affected by that particular hazards. When we're talking about the risk knowledge, risks that are more prevalent in the country during the winter seasons, which are floods, storms, severe weather, structural and field fires, and also the provincial disaster management centers in collaboration with municipalities look at strategies that can be utilized to share information with communities, as I've indicated, engaging in donors, AMACOs and the chiefs, so that those rural areas, actually, we can actually reach them. The dissemination of information, I've already indicated on that one. The issue of the warnings services, as I've indicated, that we work with the South African Weather Services, which prepare the impact-based earlier warnings for every province. Then the National Disaster Center, in collaboration with the relevant institution, such as the CSIR, prepare the risk profile based on the provincial seasonal hazards. Then we have got your response capability, which are very important in terms of deploying our resources to the communities, where looking in terms of the prior the season, where we are conducting the integrated awareness programs, and also during the incident, where communication to the affected communities is conducted through various media platforms to heightened community knowledge and preparedness to act in terms of disaster. After the disaster, of course, as the awareness continues, the integrated awareness programs and training are conducted to educate communities and stakeholders based on gaps identified during the response and incident. But as disaster management, one death is too many. We always try to avoid that. We don't have death at all. In conclusion, the contingency plan for 2023 winter season act as a framework for multi-sectoral coordination, resource mobilization for disaster preparedness, response, recovery activities. And the plan promote interdependencies, interrelatedness among spheres, while also encouraging government sectors to cooperate, to act in unison, and to support to each other. Also, the Joint Special Operation Command, which is the new center now, which is at NDMC, and then we remain activated to coordinate and facilitate the implementation of focused intervention and response measures, including monitoring and reporting of winter-related incidents and declared disasters. The Joint Special Operation Command will continuously liaise with the relevant task teams to support with coordinations and manage of extraordinary intervention measures. All provincial disaster centers and municipality disaster centers are activated to activate their joint operation centers as an early warning alerts for preparedness and informed decision making. I think, Chair, is the last slide. The next slide is a recommendation. It is recommended that the portfolio committee note the content of the presentation and progress in the preparation for the winter season, and also advocate for the prioritization and implementation of the disaster risk reduction measures by all organs of state, stakeholders, and communities. Chairperson, thank you very much for the time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And I suspect that members are ready to engage with the a briefing by the National Disaster Management Center. So I'll be guided by your hands, honorable members. I can see two already. First is Honorable Peza. Second one is Honorable Groenewald. Can I, the third one, Honorable Direko? Can I allow you, Honorable Peza?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much. I am traveling, Chair, and I am three. And I am. Can you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you, but there's somebody who is.
Yeah, there's noise. There's noise, but it's fine now. Chair,
Okay.
there's two aspects that I want to canvass here. The first one, in terms of risk reduction, is that during apartheid, Chair, you would locate the fire brigades at the town level, right? So I just want to ask what mitigation measures and what remedial action has the command team done in place to ensure that they decentralize that structure into wards, because now we are not going to wait the people are not going to wait, for instance, in the case of informal settlements, when the fire erupts, then they must wait for something, in the same way that they wait for ambulances until people die because an ambulance does not come on time. It is the same with fire brigades, Chair, that we shouldn't allow a situation where this fire brigade is located there. So what are some of the interventions and programs that will decentralize the fire brigades there? And this is apart from the fact that we see that there are some issues about officials in that particular space that are not qualifying. And the second one, Chair, that I wanted to ask, I was going to ask about e-government in terms of the funds that they have allocated during this time of the winter season, this period of the winter season. What action are they taking to ensure that they are using e-government? Because we're in the fourth industrial revolution now. We can't be using papers and using physical things to communicate payments and all those things, because it will open up a space for corruption, right? So what is it that they have done to put measures in place for e-government to actually report and disperse funds for this particular purpose, Chair? Thank you. To mitigate against corruption and financial mismanagement and maladministration. Thank you for the time, Chair. I'm sorry for the noise.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Groenewald.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, let me start by saying thank you for the presentation. I've listened closely because I'm traveling as well. And I've listened attentively as well. And everything sounds nice. It's a strategy here and a plan there, but never did I actually hear what the disaster management is doing in preventing, can I say, some of the disasters. I don't know if we have strategy documents, but if not, if the department are willing to send it to us. And then secondly, Chair, in terms of, there's two things. The first is your veld fires. I stay in Northwest, and I'm traveling currently in Northwest. And I can tell you there's a certain responsibility on municipalities to keep the roads, the grass next to the roads, to maintain those and to prevent or to make it in such a way that it prevents fires. What is the department doing to engage the municipalities in terms of doing this? And then, Chair, further on in terms of fire, if you look at municipalities' fire stations, the presenter said that the municipalities is equipped. I can tell you the most of the municipalities is not equipped with the correct equipment to, for example, veld fires. I know at one stage, Matusana municipality only had a fire truck to fight veld fires with. And everybody that knows veld fires is you have to have another vehicle to start fighting those fires. You can't do it with a truck because you have to actually stop the truck and then fight the fire, and then it must go on and so on. So, Chairperson, what is the engagement of the department in terms of municipalities to get the basics right and have the basic equipment within each municipality? Then in terms of floods, we had a flood in the Fall River earlier this year. There was actually 4 floods, and the Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District Municipalities Disaster Center, after 4 weeks, couldn't even give us a report on what is the what do you call it, the umfang. What is the total disaster that, or the amount, or can I say, in terms of the whole river area that connects to the Dr. Kenneth Kaunda area? So what are they doing in terms of the engagement with the provincial departments to make sure that they are up to standard? Because if we have to wait for a month long for a report on a disaster, how are you going to mitigate the disaster if you do not have that report? So, Chairperson, let me stay there. I'll listen and then I'll come back later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Direko.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to my colleagues and the officials from the disaster management. Chair, let me first acknowledge the presentation. And yeah, I think it was very detailed. However, Chair, I have some concerns. When Ndadu was presenting here, we had some very good plans in terms of mitigation for the disaster. However, in reality, it's something else. The reason why I'm saying this is that the competency of the district municipality is for disaster management. It's one of the competencies for district municipalities is to deal with the disaster management. However, at some stage, we went to municipalities of Northwest, and we also went to the municipalities of Free State as the portfolio committee. And when we arrived in those municipalities, we then realized that most of the district municipalities did not understand what is their role and responsibilities in terms of the disaster management. And secondly, Chair, I want to check with the team here as to, do they have any long-term plan of reducing the disaster? We know disaster is something that you cannot plan for. But when you look at other developing countries, they've already introduced the laws that will at least minimize the possibility of disaster, such as your carbon print laws that at least have incentives to some companies so that they reduce that and stuff like that. So in our country, is there any plan for a long-term plan for dealing with, for addressing challenges of the disaster? And as I've indicated, that most of the municipalities do not understand what is their roles and responsibilities in terms of the disaster. I'm part of the ad hoc committee that was dealing with the disaster. We went to KZN municipalities during the flood disaster. And our observation there is that municipalities did not have effective disaster management plan. There are some deaths that could have been avoided, but because of lack of coordination and communication, there was less that the municipality could do. So how does the disaster team ensure that they monitor and evaluate the performance of the municipality, or they train municipalities so that municipalities can understand exactly what is their roles and responsibilities? Now we're facing cholera, and I'm in Free State. But if you could go to Mwate and other surrounding areas of Free State, including my area, because I'm just not far from Nati, there's no campaigns regarding your cholera or anything. It's quiet. We only get your media statement there and there, but there's no physical campaign where the people will be informed properly and be given measures in place as to how do we handle this situation at the moment. Then that's where my question is, where is the disaster? How does it function? Where are the challenges for the disaster to spread throughout the countries? You have your Potchefstroom municipality, you have your KZN municipalities, which are prone to flood disaster. And when we were looking at the recommendations that were made by the disaster management in the past 3 to 5 years, is the same as the one that we did with this disaster of 2021. And then the question is, we already know that these municipalities are prone to the disaster. Then what is the plan? Because government is going to go there, fix the houses, fix the road and everything. But after 5 years again, that disaster, there's a possibility that the disaster will continue and continue and continue, which means that government will spend money every now and then when there's a disaster, repairing one thing for more than 5 times or 10 times. So how do we save the government money and ensure that we come with the prevention measures in terms of assessing the situation? We know there's an issue of spatial planning in most of the municipalities. When you go to KZN, where there are areas, they have built in areas that are not supposed to be, that they are not supposed to build on. So how does the disaster management work with municipalities to handle such situation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Direko. I think those questions should suffice for now. Can I allow the delegation from Kota to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've got my team here with me. With your permission, I will also give my team an opportunity to also maybe to respond to the specific questions, and then I will also take some of the questions. I will allow Mr. Hendricks to come in and to deal with the fire services questions. Mr. Hendricks? Okay, he's still going to join because he was in another commitment, but then I will allow my colleagues, either Mekolokota or Mr. Jechens, to come in and deal with issues of the disaster management plans. Jennifer?
Good morning, Doc, and members of the portfolio committee. I'm sorry, I was struggling with my mic and the volume. Can you please come back again, Doc?
Okay, no, it's fine. I will take those questions. Okay, let's take Mr. Hendricks and to answer on the fire services questions.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. The fire protection services, equipment in fire stations, and also the equipment in fire stations. Maybe while Mr. Hendricks is coming, Honorable Chair, let me indicate that on the issues of the fire stations, we had a fire services seminar in Gqeberha. And the idea for the seminar was to indicate to the fraternity of fire services that there is a need for us to reposition fire services in the country. Because Honorable Groenewald, he's correct that when you go to fire station, you'll find that a fire engine either is broken or there's no any fire engine which actually can respond to any incidences of fire in the community. We had a situation where in one of the provinces, a fire truck responded to a fire incident and then arrived there without water. And then we've seen it even, I think, on social media as well, where people actually, they were even using buckets to fill the fire truck. So what we are doing as a National Disaster Management Center to make sure that these fire stations, they are capacitated. We are currently, there is now, it is now in an advanced stage, the process which we are busy with. We are busy with the funding model specifically for the district, purely focusing on issues of fire services, because the fire chiefs, they did indicate to us that they don't have capacity to respond at all to fire incidents. Either is a fair fire, or is a structural fire, or fire in informal settlement, and are always found wanting in terms of to respond to those fires. But also, Chair, let me indicate that as NDMC, we have signed an MOU with Santam. Santam, they've been supporting fire services in relation to assisting us to procure fire engines for those struggling municipalities, but also assisting us with the equipment as well. Of course, we can't sit back as government and allow only one company maybe to fund an important instrument of government like that. So we are saying we are working with them in terms of assisting each other to make sure that we then, they augment us where we are falling short in terms of the funding, so that we can fund those fire stations in terms of the equipment and also the fire engines as well. Also, there was a question from Honorable Groenewald in relation to receiving a report after 4 weeks. It is really unacceptable, because we always say that immediately when the disasters happen or there's an incident, and we have to do the assessment so that we have the report, so that we are able to respond on time. But then it goes what Honorable Dereko actually indicated, that you do find some of the districts where really they are challenged in terms of the capacity, in terms of warm bodies to support either the fire services or also disaster management. You'll find that in other municipalities, they will use even a traffic officer to say, you are now a coordinator for disaster management. And in that instances, you always struggle even to push the traffic officer to commit and work tirelessly and give a lot of attention to disaster management in that space. So as part of the process which we are currently busy with at national, the review, overall the review of the disaster management system in the country, those areas, those are the gaps which actually we've identified in the past in terms of competencies and capacity, either at a provincial level or at a municipality level, which we want to close through this process of complete overhaul of a disaster management review process in the country, but also the repositioning of fire services in the country. But of course, we can't say people, they can die while we are reviewing the process. So we are indirectly, as I've indicated, working with Santam so that we can close those gaps, we can respond to the community's needs, but while we as government, we are bringing that needed help through the review process so that we can actually close those gaps as well. The other issue which I want to indicate from Honorable Teza, the issue under the risk reductions, I fully agree. We are now moving towards the fourth industrial revolution, and we need now to embrace technology in terms of how best we can leverage to the technology in terms of dealing with some of the issues in our space. There is also, as part of the review of the disaster management functions, there's a team now at here at the National Disaster Management Center where we are reviewing what we call it is a master system plan, where out of that plan, we'll be able actually to start to bring in some of the technologies which actually we can deploy in the space of disaster management, also in the fire services, so that we can actually leverage in terms of how best we can manage those kind of issues in the better way, rather than we do it in the old way. Also, the question from Honorable Keza, the issue of fire services, yes, not all, I would say, provinces, they have adopted the issue of decentralization in terms of taking fire services to the community. That's my message, which I always used to say to the fire chiefs, to say, let's take fire services to the communities. Because in the past, it used to be in town, and the fire service, and when the fire happens and the fire engines, they need to be dispatched from town. So we are saying, let's take fire services to the communities. We've seen in some of the big metros starting to build fire stations in townships or closer to the communities who are mostly at risk. But of course, at what level, as I've indicated, what we might need maybe to strengthening our from our side, working with municipalities, is that those volunteers which we have trained, then at least we capacitate them. I think during the time of our Deputy Minister Parkstar, when he was a mayor in COJ, there was a very progressive program in terms of involving the communities. They call it the bucket brigade, which really they train the communities, and then when something happens, at what level, then communities that can be activated. Of course, it's a long-term process, making sure that we finally making sure that these fire services is within our communities, because it is part of service delivery. So I think there are some gaps there, but it's safe to say that in other metros, they have really now adopted a stance that let's take fire services to the communities, and they have started to build some of the fire services closer to communities. I can mention way back in Kuruleni, they started to build a lot of fire stations way back, I think, during the time of our minister now, who's now a minister, was a mayor there, Gungubele. They built a lot of fire stations in the communities there. The other question from Honorable Tereko on the issues of I think there's a question about any long-term plan to reduce disasters. I think on that one, we've seen what happened in KZN, where we were found wanting, and we accepted during the time that disaster management, there are gaps which need to be closed. After April 22 floods, even the cabinet actually indicated that there's no disaster management center or function in the country. That's why we are reviewing or overhauling the disaster management system in the country, so that at the end of the day, we can actually, the plans which we have, they might be short-term or medium-term, but we want to have a situation where our risk assessment, they look beyond 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But of course, using other departments as well, which are in that space to assist in terms of what they picked up in terms of the development of the country as we move forward. So there is some work there. It might not be at the long term, but short term, medium term, but through these overhaul systems, we'll be able to make sure that we've got that long range prediction in the country, even though it's there, but then we need then to reduce into a plan, so that it becomes a plan which we can present to any committee. So for now, we have a disaster management plans which we are using, and those disaster management plans, they are risk assessment which are done, which are part of the disaster management plans, and they are looking actually at the long term. But of course, we need to have got that kind of a document which actually we can allow other departments to input on it, so that it's actually a credible document. Yes, on the issue of the campaigns, unfortunately, when you go to the municipalities, you still find, okay, disaster management, we find ourselves in the space where you have in other provinces, dysfunctional municipalities. And indirectly, what we have seen is that if you have got a dysfunctional municipalities, indirectly, it affects the delivery of fire services in that municipality, also a disaster management function as well. You tend to find that it's not really operating optimal at the level where it needs to operate, but I think some of our colleagues within COGTA, they are working on that issue as well. The issue of the campaign, Chair, quickly, on that one, we are actually supporting other provinces to conduct campaigns, but yes, there might be gaps in other areas. We're taking note of this comment, which we definitely as NDMC, we need really to follow on these comments as well. With your permission, Chair, I would allow Mr. Hendricks, if there's anything which you want to add, what I've added here, then maybe you can add, and then I can hand over to Mr. Daisel and Jennifer as well, then we can close from our side, Chair, in terms of responding to the questions. Mr. Hendricks?
Good morning to the platform, all protocol observed. No, thank you, Dr. Satoli, for the overview. My sincere apologies. I was not in the meeting, could not get the context of the questions. But while I was sitting, I was making a few notes. I just need to add a few things to what Dr. Satoli was saying. And one of them is the following: in say that in fire services within the country currently, with the major constraints that we do have, in order for us to make fire services work, it's going to have to be a collective effort. And what we see across the board is mutual aid agreements are becoming one of the new tools that municipalities are entering into. Mutual aid agreements to assist one another cross-border, mutual aid agreements to assist one another within provinces, and mutual aid agreements currently also involved in specialist rescue and hazardous materials responses. So wherever we do have a constraint in the municipality, we have a great support for the fact that mutual aid agreements are then entered into to augment and make sure that responses in terms of times and responses in terms of the necessary resources that needed to be to attend a particular incident is there. So that's why it's important for us to understand that fire services currently cannot, the way it is now, the modalities currently that's there, the constraints and the issues that needs to be addressed cannot be dealt with by just one sphere of government at all. So this is why this morning, and I was in another meeting quickly speaking to the focal points for fire services in the country. And we have come to the conclusion prior to me having to join here quickly, is that we need to have a relook at our strategic intent in terms of making sure that all spheres of government, all three spheres, is well capacitated to make sure that fire services within the country is not just capacitated for today, but for the future as well. Because expanding in terms of with regards to environmental challenges and also the expansion of the building environment makes it sometimes very difficult for a particular municipality to have the funding to sustain a particular service within 20 or for 5 to 10 years, which is why we have this mutual aid agreements that is in place to assist one another to augment and make sure that responses are augmented, and first of all our communities are given the necessary service to make sure that is done. And then also one last area that I would like to cover is to say that with regards to making sure that fires are properly dealt with, we have a strategy within the NDMC that deals with prevention and making sure that there is proper fire risk assessments done, and that means going into a municipal space, working with provinces, making sure that this strategy is implemented, the necessary resources are allocated within municipalities, and municipalities are able to then deal with whatever fires that may break out in a particular environment. So prevention is also built into our white paper for fire services. That is the core of our strategic intent taking fire services forward. It's no longer just response, no longer just making sure that we've got the proper wait, speed, and response available, but it's also to go back prior to fires breaking out, making sure that we are aware where those risk areas are, and then making sure that we put prevention mechanisms in place. Something as critical as a community emergency response team has got great effect when it comes to making sure that when fires break out in an informal settlement, for example, that people are equipped, people are trained, people are well aware of the environment or the circumstances within a fire environment, and to either extricate themselves from that position, or to make sure that at least as first responders to that particular incident, they are able to do something meaningful in terms of either putting water onto the fire, or then rather making alarm and making sure that everybody else is moved out. So the overall prevention and making sure that fires are dealt with prior to breaking out, that is the major sort of backbone of the strategic intent of fire services that we are driving within the country. It's entrenched in the white paper, and I'm glad to say, as Dr. Sithole was saying now, I'm glad to confirm we might not have full-on proper fire services within the country, but we do have aids and agreements amongst municipalities, including provinces, to make sure that where there's a lack, that we actually do have the necessary resources, at least in time, to make sure that fires don't become disastrous, as we've seen over the last few years. It's going to still be a long road for us to make sure that there is a 100% sort of reduction in terms of these fires. It will never be to that extent, but at least we do have a plan, and that is our prevention strategy. That is putting in mutual aid agreements and making sure that overall throughout the three spheres of government, we take the lead in making sure that the strategic intent of keeping our people safe is at the forefront of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendricks. With your permission, Chair, if I may allow Ms. Kolokoto, Jennifer, if there's anything we want to add, what I've just added.
Thank you, Doc. I think it's quite clear, and then the fact that the hazard profile has indicated those hazards that appeared in the presentation with the risk reduction measures. We are normally raising awareness about the fact that, as much as we request that stakeholders must develop their disaster management plans, but it's also important that every season they must tighten up their risk reduction measures to deal with all those identified hazards. And within the NDMC, we do have a unit that is dealing with awareness, also linking up with our municipalities. So that's what I can say, Doc. But we are also on high alert. Should anything happen as normal, there will be activation of the job, where we will be coordinating the efforts to make sure that we try by all means to mitigate the effects of whatever hazard that might be experienced during the season. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much, Chair. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sithole and your team. I'm not sure, honorable members, I don't know whether those are legacy hands.
Follow-up, Chair.
The follow-ups, yes. Can we start with you, Honorable Groenewald? Follow-up.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, thank you for Dr. Sithole, and I think a lot of my questions has been answered. Just a quick question in terms of firefighting or field firefighting. That's you as a department ever looked at fixed wing firefighting planes? The reason why I ask is I stay in Clarksville, for example, in Matlasana. If there's a fixed plane or fixed wing plane stationed in Clarksville, it can fight fires across, I think, 400 kilometers in radius. So it can be quite a good help. So just something that I can propose from my side. And then Secondly, Chair, in terms of what one of the presenters said, that firefighting is a collective effort, and I agree in terms of all three spheres of government. And then also that we must include is the other organizations that is out there, like fighting or helping with fire. I don't know exactly what the name is, fighting with fire or something like that. So those organizations also play a part, and they are willing to help and assist the government, but then government must do their part as well in terms of be ready for any disaster that might be there, and not a lot of red tape when it comes to these disasters. And then thirdly, Chair, I want to ask a question, and I know that Dr. Zitole won't be able to answer it, but if they can maybe answer it in a report, if we can have a report of a state of the firefighting stations per municipality that indicates the readiness in terms of domestic fire, veld fire, and rescue, and then how many people do each station serve in their radius. I know you won't be able to answer me now, but if we can get that in the report. And then also how there's a lot of complaints on the ground to say that when I try to phone the fire department, I can't get through to the fire department. What is in terms of each disaster? I know, for example, in Dr. Kenneth Kuna, they've got a call center, but that call center is not operational at all times. What is the readiness of that call center? So if they can maybe give us a breakdown in a report as well in terms of disaster management centers per province and their readiness in terms of any disaster that might be there. Chairperson, that will be my contribution. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Qeza. Is that a legacy hand or a follow-up?
Chair. Thank you very much.
Honorable Qeza, was it a legacy hand? Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes.
It's a legacy hand, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. Can we tie up this follow-up questions from Honorable Groenewald and possible almost coming to closing the meeting? I'm not sure if the minister is around. In the meantime, can you respond?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Honorable Groenewald, for the questions. I will take your comment with regards to firefighting being a collective effort, and that we need to, also do our part as a government, and make sure that we are ready, when disastrous fires or floods does occur. And that forms part of our prevention strategy, and that we work with provinces and municipalities with in identifying some of those, historically risky areas. And then we go in and then we do as much as we can awareness in those areas to make sure that those communities are capacitated. But I do take that there is a broader discussion and a broader response that we'll bring to you on that. But essentially, that is our aim in making sure that we are aware of where the risks are, how it can escalate, and what how the communities there can be capacitated. Secondly, Chair, with regards to the report of the state of readiness, I'm happy to report that I've arrived on the 1st of March, and I'm happy to report that we are in the process of concluding a state of readiness assessment across all provinces and municipalities within the country. This is part of the reason why we are having a focal point a meeting right now at the moment. My team is busy just tying up some of the issues with the provinces, and we will include some of the areas that you've identified. We are preparing the state of readiness report in anticipation of approaching the Minister of COCTA and sensitizing her about the fact that the Ministerial Board for Fire Services, which is provided for in terms of the Fire Brigade Services Act, that we need to have that board up and running so that we can begin to discuss some of these critical areas which might need political intervention, on a higher level, because administratively we might not be able come up with some of the answers there. But the report of readiness, Chair, we were busy with it. We will make sure that, as the Honourable Groenewald requested, that those areas be covered. I've made a quick note there, and we will add it to that, and we will respond likewise. With regards to the fixed wing firefighting planes, Chair, the Department of DEF is working with those resources. They are supplying those, working on fire. I cannot speak for them, but in areas where I'm familiar that they are present, in huge numbers, we have seen within the Western Cape in particular how those aerial support is actually making a major difference with regards to firefighting within those areas, and we definitely support that as an NDMC. So thank you, Chair. That is my responses there. But essentially, the report for readiness, I think it's a critical area that needs to come forward, so that our political principals can understand, in paper, get the context with regards to what it is that we are dealing with, what are the issues where we can support, and what is the current state of readiness, and making sure that our hazmats, our rescues, our fires, and our veld fires are addressed within the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. First, for the information. I'm sure members of the committee now have a sense of how ready we are in terms of these possible disasters and lessons that have been learned from the past and the plans for the future. One request was that some of the areas where you might not be ready, and you have promised to give us information related to that. We usually give time frames for such, which is not more than 2 weeks, 14 days. So I would suggest that let's get that so that we have a full picture of what needs to be done. I know that meetings on Friday are usually very difficult to manage, and people are on the move. But thank you very much for turning up for the meeting. All that includes members of the portfolio committee. We have a huge backlog. That is why we are insisting that we must have this meeting on Friday. But with those words, I want to say thank you very much for those who attended. Number 2, the presenters, and our officials who are supporting us. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.